Welcome back friends, our book summary channel Booksica.
Can't Hurt Me, Master Your Mind and Defy the Odds is a book written by David Goggins.
Can't Hurt Me. This book divide 12 chapters. Chapter 1, Should Have Been a Statistic. Chapter 2, Truth Hurts. Chapter 3, The Impossible Task. Chapter 4, Taking Souls. Chapter 5, Armored Mind. Chapter 6, It's Not About a Trophy. Chapter 7, The Most Powerful Weapon. Chapter 8, Talent Not Required. Chapter 9, Uncommon Amongst Uncommon. Chapter 10, The Empowerment of Failure. Chapter 11, What If? Chapter 7 and 11, Must Listening.
Please hit like button and subscribe our channel, Booksica. So, let's begin with Booksica.
Chapter 1, I Should Have Been a Statistic. David grew up with a brother, a loving mother, and a violent father. His dad was a businessman who made his sons work for him at night and beat them up if they didn't meet his unattainable standards. He also cheated on his wife and beat her often. When David was 8 years old, his mom divorced his dad, so they moved out to another city. David never saw his dad again. He would only see his brother some 15 years later. David struggled at school and did not learn as fast as the other kids. So he cheated. Note 1. What are the current factors limiting your growth and success? Were you beaten, bullied, etc. as a kid? Are you standing in your own way? Write everything down to the smallest detail. Chapter 2, Truth Hurts. David's mom eventually met a good guy whom David liked. He asked David's mom to marry her when David was 14 years old. She accepted. Unfortunately, he was murdered shortly after. A year later, David rode the bus to go to school, and the bus rode over a 6-year-old who got instantly killed. The years passed. Racism became worse and worse in David's city and, on the brink of desperation, he couldn't take it anymore. The only reason he still had hope was due to his dream of joining the Air Force. One day, he met Scott Guerin, a pararescue. Guerin told him how he got into an accident and was told he would never recover. Yet 18 months later, he recovered and went back to his job. This story profoundly impacted David. He understood he had to work hard. When he found out he had to get good grades to get into the army, he became serious about school. One day, as he was looking at himself in the mirror after his mom kicked him out of the house for a week, he made a decision: no more easy path, no more cheating. He wrote his goals on post-its and glued them on the mirror. And so David got to work. He began to study, work out, and play basketball seriously. He ran all the time too. After some time, he craved the good feelings that discomfort gave him. He became rough and resilient, and achieved his goal to join the Air Force. The hate he had accumulated through the years of trauma faded away. He developed confidence thanks to personal accountability. He finally respected himself. The accountability mirror doesn't lie, since it reflects exactly who you are and where you are in life. The accountability mirror demands honesty. You need to tell the truth. If you're fat, tell yourself you're fat. Note 2. Write your insecurities, dreams, and goals on post-its and glue these post-its on your mirror. If you are too dumb - study, too fat - lose weight, too skinny - workout. Own who you are. Whatever your goal is, you need to be honest about where you are on your path, and what you need to get done. Chapter 3, The Impossible Task. David joined the Air Force and 4 years later, lost all of his enthusiasm. He had become a zombie, and was unhappy. Eventually, he made it to the pararescue training for which had to swim. Since he didn't know how, he taught himself. One day, he was given the chance to be discharged due to medical reasons, and he took it. It hurt. He felt like a quitter. By the time he left the Air Force, he weighed 150 kilograms. He wanted to be big because inside, he knew he was a puss. Later on, he became obsessed with a show about Navy SEALs, so he decided to become one. He called every recruiter's office and got an appointment. He was told he couldn't weigh more than 190 pounds, and he weighed 297. He'd have to lose the weight in 3 months. Whenever he'd cut a workout short because he was tired, He'd go back to the gym to do the entire workout again. He could not be dishonest with himself. He failed the knowledge test once, but succeeded the second time. He was on his way to the SEALs. Note 3. Write down all the things you don't like to do or that make you feel uncomfortable. Highlight those which are good for you. Go do one of them, then do them again. Do something that sucks every day. Once it becomes comfortable, go further. Chapter 4. Taking Souls. The SEAL training lasts 6 months. David tried a first time but was pulled back when he caught pneumonia, so he tried a second time. He learned that everything in life is a mind game. No matter how bad something is, the pain eventually stops. He also developed a concept called taking souls. Taking souls is a game you play with your own mind by forcing yourself to overperform so that your enemy is surprised your enemy has his soul taken. During the SEAL training, he learned that all pain is finite. Smile at it. It will end eventually. Victory is about bringing your best when you feel your worst and not quitting. Goggins did not only survive his second hell week, he thrived. This is when and how he understood that he had much more inside himself than he thought. Note 4. The only way to turntables and earn respect in competitions is to show excellence. And the only way to be excellent is to work harder. Achieve what your opponent/superior could never do themselves. Chapter 5. Armored Mind. Goggins was tough during his SEAL training. His supervisors, whose task was to break the recruits, didn't like that. They often tested him, and Goggins, to gain a mental advantage over them, often accepted their challenges. He had an epiphany during one of these challenges. His whole life, he had seen his past, but these rough experiences had made him who he had become. If he saw them as challenges in training ground instead, the pain he had endured would not only make sense, but propel him too. After all, he wasn't going to quit after having endured so much. He called this technique the calloused mind. The calloused mind enables the brain to tap into the sympathetic nervous system, which energizes you. You can't use it if you're negative, so you have to get rid of negativity and push through. You should push the hardest when you want to quit the hardest. This is how you train your calloused mind. After pushing through a bit too much, Goggins had broken his knee. He was sent home from the SEALs for the second time. So he signed up for a third time. Meanwhile, he had seen his ex-wife, which got pregnant. That led him to a deep crisis. He realized that while he had had many successes, he hadn't dealt with the bunch of traumas he had had as a child. He understood that a strong mind on a fragile foundation would remain fragile in situations of deep stress. He understood he had to take care of all of the feelings he had buried to his core, as they were the source of his insecurities. He rejected his past, hence he rejected himself. The only way to accept yourself fully is to go back to your past and identify all of the moments of weakness, and label them as just that, weakness. Only when you recognize you were weak, can you then accept it and move forward. His third SEAL training eventually started. His legs were still broken, so he duct taped them. He eventually healed, and he made it all the way to graduation. He was a SEAL. The end of the training made Goggins sad. He had been accustomed to the pain and learned to love it. Note 5. Visualize an obstacle, and imagine overcoming it. Before Goggins accepts a challenge, he always imagines how it would be to succeed at it. He imagines the difficulties of the challenge, and sees himself succeeding. While visualization is great, it cannot be used without work and preparation. Chapter 6. It's not about a trophy. Goggins decided to apply to Badwater, one of the hardest races in the world. But the organizer wanted him to run an ultra-marathon of 100 miles over 24 hours first. It was Thursday. Saturday, Goggins was on the starting line without any training. A quarter into the race, he wondered why he was getting himself into these situations. He ran into physical problems at mile 50, but he kept going. At the 70th mile, he took a break, his body on the verge of collapse. He healed his wounds, then went back walking. To help, He remembered all the pain he went through in his life, tapped into his sympathetic nervous system, and went back running. He also understood that the only way to run 100 miles was to run one at a time. Remembering all of these small efforts and victories that led you where you are is a great motivation in the heat of a tough battle. You need all of the hope you can have. David calls his memories of pain and victory his cookie jar. Each memory is a cookie he takes, which helps him sustain. And so David finished the 100-mile race without any training. His kidneys were failing, he couldn't control his bowel movement, and 7 of his toes were broken. For the first time, he had accomplished something no one had ever accomplished before. He didn't want to mask the pain. The race helped him understand that human potential is much bigger than we think, and that it all starts in the mind. If he could run 100 miles without prep, what else could he do? Note point 6. Fill up your own cookie jar. Write down all of the obstacles you have overcome, all of the small and big victories, and the pain you had to go through to succeed. Set ambition goals, and use your past victories as fuel to reach new heights. Chapter 7, The Most Powerful Weapon. Goggins eventually called the organizer of Badwater to say he had run the 100 miles and was ready to compete. The organizer told him he wasn't supposed to stop during a 24H race, so he needed to complete another one. Some weeks later, while his body was still broken and he couldn't walk, he could not resist running the Las Vegas Marathon. He completed it in 3H08. He was in total disbelief of himself. How could that have happened? What else could he do? Each time he pushed the boundaries, he was surprised to see how far he could go. 5 weeks later, he was set to run another 100-mile marathon, the hurt so he trained for it despite his broken bones. He obviously suffered in the race because he wasn't prepared at all. He didn't have any lamps for the night, nor bags, and his camelback had broken. He stopped shortly after his 4th lap. After a short break, he walked to a certain point he could see on the horizon. Then when he got there, he chose another point to walk to. He eventually finished the 100-mile race in 33 hours, and came in 9th place. A couple of days later, he learned he was accepted in Badwater. Since it was one of the hardest races in the world, he decided he would study it and prepare this time. He ran Badwater and finished in 5th place out of 90. However, it still wasn't enough. Looking at the 4 ahead of him, he knew they had something he didn't. He needed to raise up to their levels. Goggins believes that shortcuts to pain are nonsense. The only way to do more and better is to go beyond your perceived limitations. The human body is like a stock car. We can go very fast, but there is a governor preventing us from reaching peak potential. Our governor is in our mind, and if we remove it, we can achieve anything. The only way to remove it is not to listen to the voice telling you to quit. Most people quit at 40% of their capacities. In order to avoid that, you need to stretch your pain tolerance. Let go of your identity. Let go of your self-limiting beliefs. This is the 40% rule, and it can be applied to anything. Your mind is wired to tend towards comfort, not performance. The way to change that is to callous your mind, meaning, chasing pain. When you're tired, acknowledge that this is your governor of pain talking. You are not as tired as you think you are. Keeping an open mind will help you keep going. Of course, it's easier to keep an open mind when you are chilling on your couch than when you're suffering. Note 7. Remove your governor. To do so, reach a point when you are super tired, and push just 5 or 10% further. Then repeat. Life is a mind game. The only person you are competing against is yourself. Chapter 8, Talent Not Required. The next race David decided to run was the Ultraman World Championship, a triathlon. He finished second. His success made him famous in the press, so he was tasked by the army to recruit more black people for the SEALs. He went on the road and spoke in a lot of universities, high schools, etc. He would also run an ultramarathon each week to show everyone he wasn't kidding. When students asked him if they could one day run 100 miles like him, this is what Goggins would tell them. Western culture has become addicted to shortcuts, quick fixes, and life hacks. Everyone is looking for maximum results with minimum effort. This attitude won't lead to mastery, or to the calloused mind. The only way to master your mind and kill the governor is to get addicted to hard work. When something goes wrong in your life, like an injury, don't just stop. Adapt. If you play piano and hurt your right hand, practice with your left hand meanwhile. After 2 years, David was done recruiting and wanted to be back on the battlefield. But before, he wanted to ride a bike from California to San Diego, so he trained like crazy until one day, he got heart problems. Any exercise would send it beating to 150 beats per minute. He found out he had a hole in his heart, and had to do surgery. But the surgery wasn't enough, so he needed a second one. He got it 14 months later, and it worked. Note 8. This is a 3-week challenge during which you will take control of your schedule. During the first week, observe when you work, how many times you check your phone, how long is your commute, when do you talk to your friends, etc. Be as detailed as possible. Identify where you wasted time and trim it. For week 2, build a schedule by blocks of 15 minutes. Do one thing at a time, and focus on it recklessly. When it's time to rest, that means no emails, etc. Optimize and refine in week 3. Chapter 9, Uncommon Amongst Uncommon. After David graduated from the SEAL training, he was sent to Malaysia, Guam, Thailand, etc. for training with his first platoon. He was bored, so he decided to train and read for DevGru. DevGru is an elite team within the SEALs. He learned there that a true leader is often exhausted, does not like arrogance, and never looks down on the weakest in the team. A true leader always does his best and helps others become their best. Goggins understood that the best look for opportunities to be their best when everyone is their worst, to uphold perfect ethics and values in the toughest moments. When everyone rests, he was working. He graduated from Ranger School, 96 out of 308 did, and entered his second platoon as leader. He trained his men like no one did before. That was too much, so his superior told him to chill a bit. Every day, he started back to zero. This mindset helped him keep on soaking knowledge because it meant that nothing was ever finished. There was always more to do, and further to go. You whether move forward, or backward. But you never stagnate. Most people don't push themselves at all. Among those that do, most stop pushing when they reach their goals. Only the very few never stop pushing. Because he was the only one in his platoon to live the SEAL ethos every day, he became a very bad leader, bullying his teammates into workouts. Note point 9. If you want to become uncommon among uncommon, you will have to stay great, meaning, never rest. Chapter 10, The Empowerment of Failure. His second heart surgery had worked, and his heart was now back to normal. 5 years after failing Delta, he wanted to go back to succeed, but he failed again because he was too arrogant. So, he decided to do something else, and set out his mind to break the records of pull-ups in 24H, 4020, to raise money for a military NGO. He succeeded on the third attempt. He did 4,030 pull-ups, but somehow he wasn't in the mood to celebrate after that. Goggins learned that failures are great, because they contain the data you need to succeed. Note 10. Think about your last/biggest failure. Write everything that went right from your failures, Then write about how it affected you. Then write about the things you can fix to avoid failing again. Then prepare better, and make another attempt. If your failure happened 25 years ago, that doesn't change anything. Write that report. Chapter 11, What If? David went back to running and in 2014, won the Frozen Hotter, a 100 miles race in a freezing environment. Then his body felt really bad again, a few weeks before yet another session of bad water. He ran 50 miles then quit. Despite all doctors telling him he was physically fit, David felt bad, really bad. One day, he called in sick as he couldn't get out of bed. He was 38 years old. His body had given up. He realized that all these years, he had never appreciated any of his victories. He kept working towards the next goal, no matter what. While that attitude won him plenty of ultramarathons and recognition everywhere, he was dying because of it. Thinking about all he had achieved in his bed, he finally felt like he was done fighting. He felt grateful. He understood that rage had gotten him to fight like he did. That all of the suffering and pain of his past had pushed him this far. After fighting all his life, he had found peace. He understood that pain had unlocked in his mind a doorway to a beautiful silence. Thinking about what may be the cause of his exhaustion, he remembered a training he did where he was told he was way too tense. He had never taken this seriously up to then. So he started stretching. He felt better and got into a stretching routine. At some point, he stretched 12 hours per day. He eventually retired from the Navy SEAL in 2015. His stretching helped him go back to running and he completed a few ultramarathons. Then he became a certified EMT and a firefighter. At 43, he is in much better condition than in his 20s, thanks to the stretching. The reason why he got all of these bone fractures was that he was always stiff, always stressed. It put a lot of pressure on his body. The last piece of advice from Goggins is what if? When you attempt to do something difficult, a lot of people will discourage you from it. But what if you could pull it off? What if is the ultimate answer to anyone that had ever doubted you. It's a reminder that the only way to know if you can do it is to try. David Goggins' message? That you should push your body to the brink of exhaustion? That you should keep your rage and trauma inside, and use it as motivation? Can't Hurt Me is not a life manual. It is a book that shows you the exact opposite of what you should do. Forcing yourself like Goggins did is admirable, but it's unscalable. Very, very few people have the mental toughness to do it, and Goggins himself admitted it took him 20 years.
If this book summary like you valuable, please hit like button and subscribe our channel, Booksica. Thank you for listening. Keep learning, keep growing.